Today I'm going to be taking a look at what is my first experience with the brand Baltic. They are a French-based micro brand, very into vintage design, and let's see what they're about. We have a diameter of 38 millimeters, a lug to lug of 47, a height of just under 12.5, and we have a lug width of 20 millimeters. Now overall very good dimensions here, very wearable size. The 47 millimeter lug to lug length I found is kind of like a sweet spot kind of lug length. So it will be able to fit on most wrist sizes as long as you're okay with the slightly smaller 38 millimeter diameter. Inside the watch we have the Miyota 821 movement, which is running very accurately at about +2 seconds a day. Beats at 21,600 vibrations per hour, so a little bit of a more stuttery seconds hand movement. Has a 42-hour power reserve. We have Hesalite crystal domed there on the front. Nothing on the case back, but you can spend an extra $30 to get a see-through case back. We have 50 meters of water resistance, and overall the watch cost about $366 on a strap with a closed case back. Add $30 if you want an open case back, and add about $66 if you want the bracelet option, which is definitely a good idea because if you buy the bracelet on its own, it's about $110. But if you buy it just with the watch, it's about $66, so you're saving about half the price. Moving on to the dial, we have a very, very simply done dial, but it is executed nicely. I enjoy the fact that they didn't use a date window. They didn't have to try to clutter the dial or get rid of the symmetry. They kept it very nice and clean. Got very just delicate hands, very thin leaf hands, very thin numerals and pips, creating a lot of space in the middle there, kind of opening up the watch a little bit more. And outside here we have this creamish, silverish color that holds the minutes as well as matches all the numerals, indices, as well as the Baltic branding there. They kept it very simple. They didn't put any information they really didn't need on the dial. We just have Baltic, which is the brand, and automatic with an underline. I think the underline is a nice little touch. Adds a little bit of something without, adding too much clutter. So well done there. But again, very, very simple, very, very delicate of a dial, and nothing too crazy. So zooming up a little bit closer with the dial, we can see there's this actual kind of slight graining. I like to kind of call it almost an eggshell black texture. It's very fine. It's not too apparent, but it definitely is there. It adds a little bit more to it being a matter / lighter black instead of the normal kind of dark inky black you see with some watches. But it does add a little bit of dimensionality that is nice to see. See that the nice leaf hands do have that kind of split down the middle. Adds a little dimensionality to the hands there. The printing is all done really well. No real misprints around them. No real messiness with the printing. I like that the numbers just themselves have a kind of bulbous quality to them. Sometimes numbers that are printed, or really however this is applied, can look very, very, very flat, and at certain angles you can really tell that there is some life, some dimensionality to those raised numerals. So it's always nice to have. But overall, very clean dial. Nothing to write home about, but well executed. So moving on to the case of this watch, as you can see there, we have this concentric circle brushing around the lugs here. We have this very defined and polished, very highly bezel here, which is quite reflective and honestly mostly distracting at times. I wish that either they would have gotten rid of this bezel section or at least brushed it, because it is quite distracting at times when you have it on the wrist as it's reflecting, changing colors from silver to black. It might be a point of interest on the watch, or it might be a point of contention for some people. It just depends on how you feel about it. It is kind of stepped in a way, whereas it comes down into this more brushed section here of what I guess we can call a second layer of the bezel. The normal horizontal brushing on the sides, drilled lug holes, the signed B for Baltic logo. Very plain case back with not much information, just a little bit of a writing about the movement, the water resistance, whatnot. We got some pretty good knurling on the crown. It is not necessarily a hand wind completely movement, but it does have hand winding functionality. So it is good to at least have a crown that is easy to grip and I guess nice to grip overall. And although this bracelet doesn't come standard with the watch, which I guess you can even kind of tell because the finishing on them doesn't look 100% in sync. It doesn't necessarily look like the bracelet itself was made for the watch, but I think it does complement the overall style and aesthetic of the vintage theme it's going for. The Beads of Rice bracelet is actually very nicely made. We can see it's brushed on the sides here, polished in the beads middle links, down to a nice Baltic clasp, which kind of mirrors it in some way where it's brushed in the middle and then polished on the flanks here. It's just a regular fold over clasp, friction fit, nothing special. It is milled, so I guess that's nice. It is very secure. Doesn't feel like it's ever going to come off. Sometimes a little hard to get off. It's just so frictionally fit in there, but not too bad. We've got a couple of holes of micro adjustment, as you can see there. It's just always nice to have. Lets you really hone in on that fit. Overall, very simple case, and the only thing that I'll mention about the case is it's like slightly beefier. You'll be able to see what I mean more when I put it on the wrist, but there's something about the case, especially I think contributed it largely by the bezel. It just looks stocky in a way and seems almost somewhat juxtaposed against the very delicate dial. And if they would have thinned it out, made it less of a sporty case, I would say, and made it more of a dressy case, I think it would have fit the design better, or at least if they would have expanded some of the font on the dial. But we'll see that more when we put it on the wrist right now. So earlier I was wearing my little pink Seiko Presage there. So here we are with the Baltic on my 6.5 inch wrist. As you can see, it fits well. It is fairly slab-sided, so it's good that it's not too thick because it still allows it to plant well on the wrist. I don't know if you can really see what I'm talking about, but there is just something that stands out to me about the case being slightly bulky and the dial being a little too delicate for the case. Is it a bad look? I don't think so. Is it the best look they could have gone for? Also no. But it is a nicely wearing watch. It is definitely unique in the sense that it does evoke such a vintage vibe just from the aesthetic, from the fact that they went with the Heslite crystal. This Beads of Rice bracelet also contributes to that factor. It is overall a nicely designed watch, and if you're really into the vintage look, I think you'll be happy with it. So as we can see there, even though it's fairly slab-sided, the mid case is very thin, and the case back doesn't protrude too much, so it does still fit pretty nicely onto the wrist overall. It is a nicely wearing watch. It is comfortable. I would say on straps, the case shape does make it look a little bit awkward. I'll show that a little bit later. And it's a cool watch, honestly. It just isn't necessarily the best watch for the price of about $350. Honestly, I'd probably go with maybe a Hamilton Khaki. But if you're really into the vintage aesthetic, this will be for you. And here we are with the Baltic on a little bit of strap. This is a nice Italian leather from Vario. I really like these straps. And I think you can kind of see here how the case looks slightly awkward on the strap itself. It is such a defined and stout case. It just lacks some of the elegance that I think we're used to seeing in these type of dressier styled watches. It's not a bad case at all. And if you're into the more masculine slash field slash workhorse kind of do anything styling, then you'll be fine. I think this watch does look more at home on maybe one-piece straps and the bracelet. And here we are with the chevron strap from Crown and Buckle, and I really think the one-piece straps kind of just tie this watch in together. It, for some reason to me, just takes away some of the weirdness that I personally feel the case shape brings to the table. Again, if you don't see what I'm talking about in this video, the watch will probably be a completely fine watch to you. There's just something about the case shape that personally I'm not in love with, I'm not getting along with. I think overall on a nice one-piece strap, it does tie the watch together a little bit better. Can't go wrong with one of these by Crown and Buckle. Very comfortable, very nicely made. A little bit on the pricier side, but they do go on sale every now and then. So pros and cons of this watch. Overall, I think one of the biggest pros is just the vintage design of the watch. It does in some way hit vintage design aspects in a way that other brands at this price point or even higher really don't do. And it's a dress watch. It's not a lot of dress watch inspired vintage designs out there. You have to just step up to something like Longines or brands on the higher end to really see anything else in that category. So it offers something interesting at the price with its design. I really like the fact that they had lug holes on the watch. It just makes changing straps easier. It makes it more of a vintage aesthetic. I think personally, I just like cases with lug holes in them. It's just a personal preference of mine. And overall, I think the bracelet, the Beads of Rice bracelet, is really nice. Of course, it doesn't necessarily come with the watch itself, but if you're going to get the Aquascaf, even if you get this watch, I'd recommend just getting it with the bracelet. Completes the vintage look. It is well made. It looks nice. It has quick release bars on it, which just makes it easy to use. It's a good bracelet. And kind of two pros/cons. The first being that mine currently runs at about plus 2 seconds a day, which sounds great, you know, pretty accurate, pretty reliable. But I had a guy who got in contact with me through Instagram, and he basically said, hey, I saw you got a Baltic, I just got one too. Is yours running really fast? And I was like, no, mine's pretty accurate. And turns out his was running at about plus 2 minutes a day. So I guess that is just a little bit of a quality control issue. I'm sure Baltic would be able to, you know, send out a replacement or offer to service it or something like that. But again, it's just something that I think you should be aware of before you make the purchase. Another somewhat pro/con is the fact that it has Hesalite crystal. Some would prefer sapphire, some would prefer mineral crystal. Hesalite is soft, it will scratch. You can use poly watch. It adds to the vintage aesthetic. It's just a bunch of pros and cons all mixed into one. I personally don't care too much either way. Sapphire is nice, but Hesalite's not a problem either. It's okay. So I only have real two cons with the watch, and the first being kind of the dial. The hands are somewhat too thin and sometimes almost not reflective enough to the point where they almost disappear on the watch. And I just think that's kind of weird sometimes. It is an overall nicely designed dial, an overall nicely looking watch, but there is something about those hands and just all the elements in general that they are slightly too thin for some reason. And kind of just going along that vein, the case is too thick. It just looks weird with the dial because the dial is so thin, it's so elegant, and the case is beefy and sporty. I understand they're trying to bridge the two worlds, but sometimes you can't have the best of both worlds. So I think the watch would have been infinitely better if they just made the font bigger or they made the case smaller. And again, if none of those things look like cons to you, it's a great watch to go for. Overall, it's a well-made watch. Is it the best watch at the price range? No. I mean, you can go up a little bit higher and get something like one of the Traska Freedivers or the Traska Summiteers that are about to come out, which are really nice. You could go for one of the Notice Field watches, which are really nice. It's really just up to you. But overall, it's a good watch, a good vintage vibe, and I hope you enjoyed the video.